Alright, another month has come and gone. When I did one of these last month for August, I said if it didn't do well, I wouldn't do any more. And it didn't do well. But fuck it, I had fun doing it, and some ideas take a little while to catch on, so I think I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to stick it out till at least the end of the year with these. So here's everything from September, everything I've been watching in September. I kicked off September with Throw Momma from the Train. This was the result of, I was around at my dad's house, and my dad and my sister and me were browsing through Amazon Prime for like half an hour. We couldn't all agree on something to watch, and the one thing we could all finally agree on was Throw Momma from the Train, which I haven't seen in a few years, but I thought it held up pretty well. There's a lot of movies that have kind of like parodied or homaged Strangers on a Train. You know, like Horrible Bosses, or like there's a lot of sitcom episodes where they decide to do their own Strangers on a Train thing. But I think what a lot of the parodies missed that was really the compelling hook with the Hitchcock original was the two people want to do each other's murders. You know, in Horrible Bosses, all three of them want their bosses dead. They're all in on the plan. But on Strangers on a Train, there's like the one crazy guy who wants to go through with it, and then there's the other guy who's like, "Can I get off this train and not be near this weirdo anymore?" So he doesn't want it. He wants no part in the plan. And Throw Momma from the Train is like the only parody I've seen that actually gets that right, because Danny DeVito's all for the murder thing. He goes to kill Billy Crystal's ex-wife, and then he just expects Billy Crystal to kill his mom, and Billy Crystal doesn't want to kill his mom. And they have such great chemistry, Billy Crystal and Danny DeVito in this film. It's so much fun, and Anne Ramsey is incredible as like this really mean, overbearing, evil mother. It's just a really funny movie, and the twists and things as they come along, they genuinely kind of catch you by surprise. Broad City. About like 2 or 3 times a year, I'll watch Broad City all the way through. It's one of the best comfort shows. You know, you can't be in a bad mood when you're hanging out with Abby and Alana. It's like a guaranteed pick-me-up to watch a few episodes of that show. It's just a really smart, really funny, really inventive show. Hang on, I'm gonna sneeze. Jesus, fuck. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is just a movie that never gets old. I watched it a couple of months ago, before went on the opening day of Across the Spider-Verse to kind of refresh myself for watching Across the Spider-Verse, and I watched it again now, just a couple of months later, and it's just such a perfect, beautiful movie. You know, just the "What's up, danger?" Leap of faith moment is just one of the all-time great movie moments. And it's an origin story that never gets old, which is so rare. Usually the superhero sequels, where they're already the superhero, they just jump right into the action, are the most fun, rewatchable, action-packed ones. But with Into the Spider-Verse, you've got there's like half an hour before Miles even gets his powers. But it's not, most of the origin stories, you go back, revisit them, and they're kind of boring until they get the powers. But Into the Spider-Verse is just spectacular from the opening frame to the final frame. You are so not invited to my bat mitzvah. This came out on Netflix a few weeks ago, and it kept getting pushed on me at the top of the screen, and I love Adam Sandler, so I thought, might as well give it a try. And this was a wonderful, wonderful movie. I thought this was fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. It's got a lot of the familiar tropes of coming-of-age movies, like the girl, fancies this guy, and then her best friend kisses him, and she doesn't want to be her friend anymore, and they have a big falling out. And it's all sort of in the lead up to their bat mitzvahs. And that was kind of the fresh spin it put on it, because you've seen a lot of teen coming-of-age type movies, but not a lot about, Jewish kids. And bat mitzvahs, or bar mitzvah for a boy, is like a huge rite of passage. There may have been a coming-of-age movie about this kind of thing, but I've never seen it done before. But it's such a great idea, because it's like in the Gentile coming-of-age movies, the kid becomes an adult when they turn 18. But in the Jewish culture, it's like when you have your bar mitzvah at 13, that's when you become a man or a woman. And I thought it was great. I thought the lead actress was fantastic. There was a lot of talk of nepotism, because it's, Adam Sandler plays the dad, and then the 2 daughters are played by his own daughters. I thought they were great. The older one was, I don't know their names, but the older one was sort of a supporting character. She would just pop up, but she was like a scene stealer. She would have a really funny line, deliver it really, really well. And then the younger one is the star of the movie. She really anchors the movie with a really great performance. When there's these complaints about nepotism in Hollywood, I get it if the kid's a bad actor. In the movie After Earth, would have been a lot better with someone else playing Will Smith's son than Jaden, because Jaden's not that great of an actor. So then you can cry nepotism. But when they're as great as Adam Sandler's daughters are in this movie, then I see no reason to complain. It's like they were kind of given a leg up because their dad's one of the biggest movie stars in the world. But they've inherited his star power, and And they clearly didn't take this opportunity lightly. They didn't like take it for granted. They like really, it was a pair of great performances, and it was a great movie. I really loved it. Another Year. Holy shit, this was a great movie. This is a Mike Leigh movie, and another kind of like, you know, slice of life kind of movie where it kind of just follows this couple, this older couple, played brilliantly by Jim Broadbent and Ruth Sheen, and they're both incredible in the movie. And it just follows like a year of their lives, and sort of like a quarter of the film is each season. It kind of just takes you through this year of their lives, these little like snapshots of their daily lives. And one of the most refreshing things is that they're happy. They have a good marriage. There's no conflict between Jim Broadbent and Ruth Sheen at all. They're just living their lives, and they're perfectly content and happy with them. And they still love each other, been together forever, but they still love each other's company. And it's the conflict comes from the people who come crashing into their lives. Like one of the Ruth Sheen's co-workers, played by Leslie Manville, who was fucking incredible in this movie. That was one of the best performances I've ever seen. She was just as this kind of like erratic, depressed, lonely kind of like woman of a certain age kind of character. It was like you watch her performance and you know that person, you've met that person. It was just phenomenal. I mean, everyone in the cast was phenomenal. Mike Leigh's just one of the best directors of directing actors, and usually with improvised dialogue, but he's great at giving them all the tools they need to turn his prompts into like a great scene. It was just brilliant. It just really did capture what life feels like. It was just really such a beautiful, incredible movie. It's one of those great movies where nothing really happens, but like everything's happening. It's about the beauty and the mundanity of life. Between the Lines. This was a great little movie from the 70s. They found on Mubi about the staff of an anarchist alternative newspaper. And I found that it's not really trying to make a political statement in itself. The film. It's just like an intimate snapshot of these people's lives, and you kind of see their relationships with each other and their disagreements with each other. And the director, Joan Micklin Silver, she kind of drew from her own experiences working for the Village Voice. And some of her friends work for similar publications. She kind of drew from them, and they helped with the script. And the whole thing felt so authentic and accurate. And great performances from the cast. There's a lot of there's like an early career Jeff Goldblum. He's kind of like it steals every scene he's in. And Bruno Kirby was great in it, and John Hurd was great in it. There's just so many terrific actors, terrific recognizable actors in this cast, and they're all wonderfully naturalistic. Even Goldblum, he's doing his Goldblum thing, but it feels natural, it feels organic. A Fish in the Bathtub. So when I finished Between the Lines, Mubi said, hey, you like this? You like Joan Micklin Silver? We've got another movie of hers called Fish in the Bathtub, and it's Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, Ben Stiller's parents. And they had been like a comedy double act for decades together. Like when Ben Stiller was growing up, that was like his parents' job, was they'd be in the living room working out their bits, and then they'd go and do shows. And then in the 90s with Seinfeld, and then with King of Queens, Jerry Stiller had kind of like a career renaissance. He got like a second wind. And Ann Mira never really got that second leg of her career. But they're in this movie together as a married couple. And it's the complete opposite of Jim Broadbent and Ruth Sheen in Another Year. This is a married couple who are constantly on the brink of divorce, constantly yelling at each other and constantly bickering. And it's always fun to watch like a real life couple who love each other, but they play a couple who kind of hate each other. And like the final straw for Ann Mira is Jerry Stiller brings home this like massive live trout thing, and he lets it live in the bathtub. And she's like, right, that's it. I'm moving out. I'm gonna live with our son. And I read up some of the reviews. It got terrible reviews. They all thought they play up the bickering a bit too much, and it goes a bit too far to the point where it's like this cartoonish exaggeration of married life. But I kind of enjoyed that. I thought that was funny. That was like the most extreme version of a bickering couple, where like they have all their friends around and they're just having the most intense, bitter argument in front of it, making everyone uncomfortable. And it's just, watching Jerry Stiller yell at people will never get old. That's always going to be fucking hilarious to watch. I've been watching the Futurama revival on, I think it's on Hulu generally, because the title says Hulu Rama when it comes on, but it's on Disney Plus here in the UK. And I wasn't loving it that much. I was thinking like, as I was watching it, I'm thinking it's trying too hard to be topical. Because there's episodes about Bitcoin and Amazon and COVID. There was a whole pandemic episode. But then I was speaking to Ruth, who you may remember Ruth I dedicated my Peep Show video to her. She's in Australia now. I was talking to her about it. She's a big Futurama fan, and she's been loving the new season. I feel like maybe I was being a little bit too harsh on it. And looking back on it, it certainly had its moments, and it certainly had some big laughs. So I might just be holding it to too high of a standard, because I'm comparing it to like Jurassic Park and Look of the Friarish and Godfellas and all these classic, iconic, timeless Futurama episodes from the greatest era of the show's run. But if you compare the new season to the Comedy Central years, it's basically as good as it was on Comedy Central when it was revived for the first time or second. I can't remember. The show's been gone away and come back so many times. And I also, because you only get one Futurama a week, I've been going back and watching some of the older Futuramas as well. I watched that weird season that's like 4 feature-length films chopped up into episodes, and there's some really good stuff in there. There's a great storyline with Bender having an affair with the robot mafia boss's wife, and the robot mafia boss has no idea, even though it's happening right under his nose. And there's a whole great storyline with like a giant like octopus monster like is in a toxic relationship with humankind, which was really interesting. And he's voiced by David Cross, which is hilarious. Monsters Inc. I wanted to watch Monsters Inc. after watching Throw Momma from the Train, because if you grew up with Monsters Inc., it's impossible to watch Billy Crystal and hear his voice and not hear Mike Wazowski. So I rewatched that, and that's just such a wonderful, fucking perfect movie with so much heart and so much humor, and so exciting. Like that whole final act where they hang on to they go to like the door world where all the doors are clattering around on conveyor belts, and they get chased around by Randall and like jumping into. That's such a great like climactic sequence. And Billy Crystal and John Goodman, if I remember correctly, recorded their lines together. Whereas normally for these kinds of movies, everyone just records their lines separately. But you can really tell with the chemistry between Mike and Sully that John Goodman and Billy Crystal were in a booth together and they're playing off each other. And it just creates such even though they're monsters, it creates such a tangible, identifiable friendship between them. And all the stuff with Boo is just like it's like switches between heartwarming and heartbreaking, especially at the end when Mike has reconstructed the door and he needs the one little bit that Sully has kept taped to his clipboard. That I can't watch that and not cry my eyes out. I'm gonna tear up now just talking about it. And the final shot where he opens the door and she's like, "Kitty." So good. Such a great movie. That is like Pixar, like firing on all cylinders. That's like the best of Pixar. Borat. This is just another movie that's just so perfect and so rewatchable, and you could watch it like once a week and it would never get old. You would still laugh at every bit, every turn. And it is still, so many people since the success of Borat have tried to do that kind of on-camera pranking kind of comedy, and all of them just pale in comparison to Borat. It's just like it's so perfectly constructed. They have the perfect scenarios and they have for this character to be in, and to get the best reactions out of people. And I feel like a lot of this kind of stuff now is about trying to get people to reveal their worst side and trying to force people to say the bad things. Whereas with Borat, it's like they can go either way. Like when he's getting the driving lesson, the guy is just nice to him. The guy doesn't get angry at him, and he even kind of like gives Borat a lecture on consent and about the importance of consent.
Why not? Because a woman has a right to choose who she has sex with.
What?
How about that? Isn't that amazing?
You joke?
There must be consent.
And no one told him to do that. He's just apparently is a good guy, you know. And it's like, so like those frat boys who say the most horrible, vile shit when he's drinking with them in the RV. They, I think, and some others tried to like sue the movie company because they felt they'd been defamed. But it's like, you chose to say all that shit, you know. Borat didn't force you to say it. It's like he just gave you the opening to say it, but you could have just as easily said the complete opposite thing. So that with Borat, it's not about trying to make people look bad. It's about trying to get people to reveal themselves, and sometimes they reveal themselves to be decent people, and sometimes to reveal themselves to be the worst pieces of shit in the world. Ahsoka. I've been watching Ahsoka every week because I've been reviewing the episodes on Game Rant. Check them out. I think it's been fantastic. I think it got off to a bit of a slow start. And I was kind of like, ugh, you know, for the first couple of episodes, it's kind of like, is this all we can expect from Star Wars now? It's like everything's going to be just a little bit mediocre, and it's not going to like really invigorate the sense of wonder that Star Wars is supposed to. But then I got to, I think, about episode 4, and it really started to pick up. And then there was the episode with Hayden Christensen in, which was just incredible. A lot of it was fan service to see him in his Clone Wars armor with Clone Wars hair, but it's Hayden. That was incredible to watch as a fan. And that whole flashback sequence, Ariana Greenblatt was fantastic as young Ahsoka. That was like a seamless transition from the Rosario Dawson version to her version of playing the teenage Ahsoka. And that was just so visually incredible, with like the kind of like the fog of war and the clone troopers come running out. Even just seeing like actual live actors in clone armor was great, because they were all fucking CG in the prequels. And then the following episode where Thrawn shows up and he has this amazing entrance where he's like, there's these like zombie stormtroopers all chanting his name. Ahsoka started off as like, yeah, it's okay, it's good, it's fine, and then but somewhere in the middle it kind of like elevated to like, this is like some of the best fucking Star Wars we've ever had, certainly in the Disney era of it all. And it's given me so much faith in Dave Filoni he's doing like the Mandalorian movie where Thrawn will be the villain. It'll kind of bring all these different shows together. And I was a little bit skeptical of that at first, because it's like, he's a TV guy, not really a movie guy, and it's like, can he make something that's so cinematic that I need to go out and see it on the big screen? I mean, I fucking will anyway. Even if it's a piece of shit, I'll go and watch it opening night.
Worst cosmic wars ever. I will only see it 3 more times today.
But Ahsoka's been so cinematic, so many great visuals, that I'm like, yeah, this guy can do a fucking movie. I can't wait to see his Mandalorian movie. I watched Dawn of the Dead. On Prime, there was the extended Cannes cut, which I'd never seen. I've only ever seen the theatrical Romero cut. But I think this Cannes cut is essentially like an assembly cut. It's I couldn't even really notice that many differences, but it's like, when you could spot a difference, it was like, I mean, it wasn't rough. It's the idea is like, this is the rough, bloated one, and then the original version is the proper one. And I do get that. It's certainly more streamlined, the original version, but this Cannes version I thought was terrific. It's still a bloated version of Dawn of the Dead. It's still a fucking masterpiece of horror. It's one of the original versions, one of the pillars of horror cinema, one of the great horror movies ever made. And this version is like, you get to have 20 more minutes of fun with it. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. I didn't love this. I know a lot of people do love it, but I can see why it's a cult classic and not like a mainstream hit. I didn't really connect with it. I could appreciate the weirdness of it all. That's another great cast, a lot of great actors in it, but I don't know. It didn't really grab me. And maybe if I'd watched it when I was a bit younger, I would love it. But a little bit older, a little bit more cynical, and just don't have time. Just don't have time for that shit. The Mitchells versus the Machines. When this came out on Netflix a couple of years ago, I remember thinking like, oh, that title's so crappy, and the movie's probably going to be crappy, and it's like older people's idea of how younger people now are always on their screens, and I thought like, that's not going to resonate. But I was so fucking wrong. This is one of the best animated movies ever. This is great. And every time I watch it, I must have seen it like 5 or 6 times now, I always find new jokes that I missed the first time. It's like, because they just jam-pack every frame and every line of dialogue with just as many laughs as they can. But it has an emotional core as well. It's like this strained father-daughter relationship, and they're forced to kind of like get to know each other better and relate to each other a bit more and connect a bit more when they're on like a family road trip. And then, a robot army rises up to take over the world, and it's up to this family, like, they're the only ones who can save the world. And they can't even get along with each other, so they have to be able to get along with each other to save Earth. I'll give this film the best compliment I can give an animated film, and that's that it reminds me of Pixar. It reminds me of the Pixar style, with just so much heart and wit and charm and imagination and big laughs and like deeply felt emotions. It's just a wonderful movie. I'd recommend it to anyone. It's fun for all the ages, 8 to 80. But even if you're under 8 or over 80, you can enjoy this. I watched Arrested Development. Every night I fall asleep with the TV on. It's like soothes me to sleep. It's like TV, sitcoms and things are like my version of nature sounds or whale sounds, whatever the fuck other people listen to get to sleep. And this month, Arrested Development was the show I would put on when I was in bed, and just seasons 1 to 3. Not the crummy Netflix seasons. Some people even lump season 3 in with 4 and 5 and say that that's not as good as the first 2 seasons. But I disagree. I think it's great. I think it certainly took a bit more of a cartoonish turn in season 3 with all the stuff with Tobias's hair plugs and all the stuff with Mr. F.
Mr. F.
and Rita and all that whole thing. But it's still really funny, and it's still like, Arrested Development is an absurd, surreal show. So I'm perfectly happy for it to take a cartoonish turn. I think Arrested Development, what makes it so great, it has the same ingenious blend of highbrow and lowbrow that you see in The Simpsons that makes The Simpsons so great. That it will have like the smartest jokes that you need to really know a lot about history or politics or whatever it is to get it. And they will also have like the dumbest like slapstick gag you could imagine like within the same episode or even within the same scene sometimes. Return of the Living Dead. Someone mentioned this in the comments of I did a video about horror comedy movies, and to tell you the truth, I'd completely forgotten about Return of the Living Dead. I hadn't seen it since I was a teenager, but someone had reminded me, in the comments, and I remember it was a lot of fun, so I watched it again. I don't know if it's one of the greatest horror comedies ever made, but it's certainly a fun ride. And I love the way it actually combines the horror and the comedy. It's not like a horror movie with some jokes, or a comedy movie with some scares. It's like the comedy comes from the horror. It's from the zombie effects and stuff. And it has its own take on zombies. These aren't like Romero zombies where it's like you stab them in the head and they're gone. It's like these ones are much harder to kill. Spirited Away. This is just, what can I say about this at this point? It's just a masterpiece. It's a roller coaster. It's just a magical, beautiful movie. Just perfectly made. And it's just great. It's probably the most famous Studio Ghibli? Studio Ghibli? Their most iconic, most famous movie, but maybe My Neighbor Totoro. And you can see why. It's like the pinnacle. Well, it's another one that reminds me of Pixar. It's got a lot of heart and wit and charm and imagination and all those things I was just saying about Mitchell's vs. the Machines. It's just incredible. It's like it's a truly a visual journey, House on Haunted Hill. I love the Joe Dante movie Matinee, where the John Goodman character is kind of like a satirical caricature of William Castle. But I don't think I'd ever really seen anything that William Castle's done. He's sort of like considered one of the kings of like the B movie. And but House on Haunted Hill popped up on some streaming service I was watching, and I gave it a watch. And I fucking loved it. Usually I don't go for like the older horror movies. Don't really scare me that much because I've been so desensitized by modern horror where they push the envelope every step of the way. The House on Haunted Hill, as an old school horror movie, was just fantastic. It was a masterpiece. Vincent Price was great in it, and it was just, the effects were great. And you can see, like, when a skeleton comes walking out of a vat of acid, you can see the strings holding it up. But that's okay. It's still creepy to see a skeleton walking around, even if, obviously, it's fake. It's not, what are they going to actually animate a real skeleton through some kind of voodoo witchcraft? And it's like the 50s. They can't digitally remove strings. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for that stuff. But it was just, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. The Last Man on Earth. After House on Haunted Hill, I was in a Vincent Price kind of mood, and I'd remembered I bought Last Man on Earth on DVD ages ago. I never watched it. So I put it on, and my DVD of it has an absolutely atrocious transfer. It really looks like shit. There was like a green bar at the bottom of the screen the whole film, and it's just, it looked awful. But I would have looked past that if it was a great movie, but I didn't think the movie was all that great either. If House on Haunted Hill is old school horror at its absolute best, Last Man on Earth is old school horror at its worst. I found it to be almost as boring as actually being The Last Man on Earth. And the zombies in this movie are more of an inconvenience than a real threat. And apparently it inspired Night of the Living Dead, one of the great horror movies of all time. So I can't really knock it, Last Man on Earth walked so Night of the Living Dead could run. But Romero took this idea and executed it a million times better. The Simpsons season 33. I think me and my sister are the only two people on Earth who still watch new Simpsons episodes. I don't even think 33 is the most recent season, but it's the most recent season on Disney+. And there's an episode we both really liked called Pixelated and Afraid, where it's about how Homer and Marge's relationship has just become entirely about watching TV together. And then they get like stranded in the woods and they have to like talk to each other and live without having TV. And it was just a really sweet episode about how much Homer and Marge really love each other. It's just so much nicer than the episodes where they were like on the brink of breaking up because Homer fucked something up really badly. And that's relatable. Like a lot of couples, or certainly relationships I've been in, have been like largely defined by TV shows we watch together. And that feels like where you're kind of enjoying the show together is a big part of it. It's not just like, oh, it's a good show. It's like, it's our show, which was just sweet. It's a sweet episode. They can still, a lot of these episodes of this season were very forgettable, but sometimes they'll have an episode like that, and it's like they can still knock it out of the park sometimes. Bridesmaids. This is just one of the greatest comedies ever made, one of the funniest movies ever made. And another one, like Borat, just never gets old. There's very few comedies over 2 hours where they feel like they couldn't be any shorter. Or it feels half an hour too long. But that's really not the case with Bridesmaids. I think it's like 2 hours and 5 minutes long, something like that. But you couldn't really lose a second of it. It's such a great story, and it keeps moving at such a pace. And it's one of those movies where there's lots of improv going on, but it's never... the improv never brings a scene grinding to a halt. You know, it never... Like, Melissa McCarthy is just fantastic. You can see why, like, after this movie, she became, like, one of the biggest movie stars. Because she's just so fucking funny in it. And she was even... This is so rare for, like, a raunchy R-rated comedy. But she was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. And I think she should have won. I don't know who did win. But I guarantee it was not as memorable a performance as Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids. It's the pinnacle of the Apatow brand of mixing raunchy humor with, like, heartfelt sincerity. It's a movie that is really, really funny. I mean, even Rose Byrne as Helen Harris III is just so great. She's so great at being, like, someone you hate, but someone you love to hate. And then towards the end, how this sort of, like, perfect plastic facade she's kind of built around herself starts crumbling down. I mean, you see that from The Offset, where it's like her stepkids treat her like shit, and she kind of just brushes it off. But then she really, when Lillian goes missing and she's out with Annie trying to find her, they have this real, like, heart-to-heart where they kind of, like, address their differences and overcome their differences, and it's just so great. It's like, so many comedies are content to just be funny, and that's fine. Like, you're going in to laugh, and so if you laugh, but this is an example where you're laughing the whole way along, and then it ends, and then you kind of feel a little bit emotionally enriched, or you feel like you've really witnessed a story, you've really seen a character go on a journey, and change from being one way to being another way, and being a better person, and getting her shit together. It's just great. It never gets old. 8.5. I must have seen 8.5, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, or maybe 8.5 times, I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of it, even though Fellini is one of my favorite filmmakers, and 8.5 generally considered to be one of the absolute greatest movies ever made. I've always been a bit, not so keen on that one. Because I prefer the realist Fellini movies, like the Dolce Vita or I Vitelloni. That's my jam. Over the more fantastical ones, like La Strada. I'm not a huge fan of La Strada, which is like a Fellini fairy tale. But after watching, after giving 8.5 yet another chance, where it's like, I must be missing something here. I gotta see something. I gotta see this again. And now I finally recognize 8.5 for the masterpiece it is. Because I've always loved the surreal dream sequences. I think that opening dream sequence where it's really quiet and eerie, and there's just something a little bit heightened about all the stuff that's happened. Well, it's a lot heightened when you've got a point of view shot of a guy who's being flown like a kite, and you see the thing tied to his ankle, and he's just looking down at the beach, and someone's flying him like a kite. That's very heightened. But even just where it really opens and it's a guy stuck in a traffic jam and just everyone in the cars around him is just staring at him. Like, that's so creepy. And I've always loved that opening scene and thought, like, that must be where David Lynch kind of got a lot of his style from. But then as the movie goes on, I didn't really like the indulgent meta stuff in between, you know, where Fellini had made 8 movies and he was struggling with writer's block, and he couldn't come up with another project to do next. And so he ended up making a movie about a director who's not sure what his next movie should be. I just always found that very, very indulgent, very, very boring compared to some of the profound struggles, you know, like I Vitelloni is the universal thing of, you know, you've got to your adult life, and the question is, do you settle down here in your hometown, or do you go off and explore? And out of the group of friends, like, I think just one of them ends up leaving. The others are all at home with their wives while he's leaving on the train. And that's something that resonates decades later and in a different country. I'm watching it and like, I can feel it. And I'm like, yeah, I went through all that with my friends a couple years ago. Whereas, you know, like a famous revered director who's not sure what movie he should make next, not quite as relatable. But this time I was really charmed by the way the two styles, the dream sequences and the director just living his life, how they start to blend together as the film goes on. And there starts to be a bit more surrealism in the scenes with the director just trying to make his movie. And you've got like the typical Fellini stark realism, but it's in a heightened reality. Anyway, I was blown away by it this time. I thought it was an incredible achievement visually and narratively. I just feel like an idiot for all those times I sat and watched 8.5 and was just like, meh, not for me. Not okay. This was a crazy movie about a young woman tells people she's going to Paris and she gets a few days off work and she's making all these fake Instagram posts of her around Paris with Photoshop. She's wearing like a beret and then she'll put like the Eiffel Tower in the background. And then there's a massive terrorist attack in Paris, and basically exactly where her last Instagram post was supposedly taken. So her parents and all her friends are calling. They're like, "Holy shit, are you okay? Were you in the blast zone or anything?" And she's still at home, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm okay." And rather than just come clean, she decides to pretend she survived the attack so she can become famous from her fake trauma. That is the same that a lot of people have the real trauma of. She goes down to the airport with a fake bag, and as everyone's getting off the plane from Paris and all the reporters are trying to like take pictures of them and get the quotes from them, she just like joins the crowd and pretends she's getting off the plane with them. And then just keeps escalating and escalating. She goes to these support groups where a lot of people have been in horrible situations like she's pretending to be. It didn't really build up to that satisfying of an ending. The message basically is she's a piece of shit and she shouldn't have done this. And that's it, the end. But it was fun to go along with. It was just a great dark comedy where someone does something horrible and then gradually the consequences start to spill out and she starts to regret it as she should. It was just, I don't know, it was interesting. The ending wasn't that great, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it while it was going on, and you see her making these terrible mistakes, and she just keeps going deeper and deeper into this lie that is having like nationwide ramifications. Heavyweights. I heard Judd Apatow on a podcast saying that his first produced script was an attempt at like a Disney movie that turned out way more demented than the average Disney movie. And when I heard him talking about that, I was like, well, I've got to see this. And it's like a movie, it's set at like a fat camp, and Ben Stiller is like the insane head of the camp, and he's like this sort of like jacked, crazy guy who's forcing all these fat kids to like walk up mountains with him and stuff. And then they all rebel against him, like all the kids team up to like fuck him up. I do agree with Apatow that that's a lot more demented than the average Disney movie. And I think if I'd watched it as a kid, I would have fucking loved it. As a fat kid who, the headmaster of my school actually recommended, they were doing like a fat camp type thing. And he told my mom, like, you should recommend getting your kids in this. And then my mom was like, fuck you. So we never had to go to the fat camp. She just, as an act of defiance, she kept like feeding us more. So if I'd seen this movie as that kid, I would have fucking loved it. And like I appreciated it. I wasn't like, Jesus, what a piece of shit. I shouldn't have watched that. You know, it was really funny. There was some really funny stuff in it, and some of the kids were really funny. And obviously, Ben Stiller is a bad guy. This was sort of like an early prototype of White Goodman, which obviously was fun to watch. Tokyo Story, that's another one where it's on the Sight and Sound polls with 8.5 and Citizen Kane and Vertigo. You always see Tokyo Story as one of the greatest movies ever made. And I'd never seen it. It was re-released in cinemas for its 70th anniversary. So I went down and watched it. And, I think it's one of those cases where it's been built up too much. Like, it was a really touching, really wonderful kind of little family drama. But I was a bit disappointed just because of how great it was supposed to be. I mean, it is a great film. I thought it used music beautifully. And you really believe that this is an old married couple and they go down to Tokyo, visit their kids, and you really believe that that's their kids and that's their grandkids, and it just has this whole kind of feeling of, I hope I say this right, verisimilitude. The like reality of it all. One scene in particular hit me really hard, because the mom is talking to her son's widow, and telling her to like move on and find someone else because she doesn't want to end up alone. Their whole conversation about loneliness and the right person's out there and all that business was like a lightning bolt right to my heart. I really felt that. I was really touched by that. I also loved the scene of the dad drinking with his old buddies down at a bar, and they get really drunk, and a cop has to drop them off at the daughter's house in the middle of the night, and she's furious, and he's just too drunk to even care. That was really funny. That's one of my favorite things to happen in foreign films. It's like when someone gets really drunk, like the sort of epilogue in La Dolce Vita. The main guy, Marcello, is at a party and he's really drunk and he's making everyone uncomfortable and being really rowdy and raucous. And that's just so funny because they're the movies from, totally different countries and totally different languages, from a completely different century than I grew up in. But people getting too drunk and pissing people off, that's like a universal thing that has happened since the invention of booze that we've all experienced, that we've all been around. Pride and Prejudice. Normally I wouldn't bother with this kind of film. I'm not really into costume dramas. But I found out Mr. Darcy in this version is played by Tom Wamsgans. So I was like, well, I've got to fucking watch this. And it was fine. It was okay. It wasn't as much Tom as I would have hoped. This is like the one time they actually tell the story entirely from Elizabeth's perspective, and it's when Mr. Darcy is played by fucking Tom Wamsgans. It's like, of all the Pride and Prejudice adaptations, to finally just take Elizabeth's perspective and not give a huge role to Mr. Darcy is when they've got Mr. Darcy played by fucking Tom from Succession. It's very annoying. I would have hoped to see a lot more of him. Naked Lunch. This is a weird fucking movie. It's like a noir, but with giant insects. It was typical David Cronenberg. It felt like one of the quintessential Cronenberg movies. With just, the effects were absolutely incredible. I think this was one of the few times he was given like a reasonably hefty budget. And he just used it to make these huge insect people that are just absolutely disgusting. You know, this is like, he had just done The Fly, I think, a few years earlier. And this is like, well, what if we have like 20 Brundle flies in the movie? It was wild, surreal shit, but I really enjoyed it. Jurassic Park. I just did a video about this where I'd been to see it for the 30th anniversary. They were doing a screening at the cinema, and I was just struck by how fucking well it held up today and how much it put a lot of this year's blockbuster movies to shame. But anyway, I covered that all in last week's video, so I'm gonna go over it all again. I finished Peaky Blinders, and honestly, by the end of it, I'd kind of fallen out of love with it. I was like, Jesus, when is this fucking show gonna end? Because it just kept going on and on. There are these wild storylines where, like, Tommy Shelby's running for office. What the fuck? Tommy Shelby's a member of parliament? I did like the final twist, though. I liked that the whole season was built around Tommy's doctor has told him, you're gonna die in a few weeks, you've got this horrible terminal illness, you've not got long left. So he's kind of like trying to make peace and trying to make sure his family's gonna be secure when he's gone. A bit like Breaking Bad, except he already broke bad fucking years and years ago. And then in the finale, just as Tommy's about to kill himself, he finds out that he's not terminal. He doesn't have this disease his doctor told him about. His doctor was in on it with the bad guys and had made it up. So I liked that twist. That was a really unexpected twist, a really great twist. But I didn't really like how it was delivered, you know? He finds out he has as he's about to kill himself, he has like a hallucination. That was another thing. The last couple of seasons were like, or the last season anyway, is like 90% dream sequences. It's like nothing's fucking happening for real anymore. Tommy just like lives inside his own fucked up mind. And just as he's about to kill himself because he thinks he's gonna die anyway, his dead daughter comes to him in a vision and shows him a photo of his doctor with the bad guys. And he realizes, oh, they're in cahoots, and he fucking made up the diagnosis. You know, I would have preferred if Tommy had found that out like through the proper channels. If he did an actual investigation, he found out on his own. It's like a bit of a cop-out to have his dead daughter's ghost fucking be like, hey, look. And how does he even know that's true if he just imagined it? And like, it turns out it is true. It's like, how did she know? She's not even there. He's imagining her. But whatever. Cillian Murphy was fantastic till the very end. But when I finished it, I didn't miss it. I was glad to see it go. Babylon. This was one of the biggest box office bombs of recent times. This was sort of like Damien Chazelle's Magnolia, the movie where he gets way too ambitious and way too indulgent. I was kind of struck by, this is supposed to be like an artsy, awardsy kind of movie, like a prestige movie that was supposed to be a big Oscar hit. But it has more piss, shit, and vomit than a fucking Jackass movie. You know, the opening scene is they're trying to get this elephant up a hill so they can take it to this party, and the guy in the back of the wagon, the big fucking elephant anus opens up and shits all over him. He's covered in elephant shit from head to toe. And then you cut to the actual party, and there's this big fat studio producer guy lying down naked, and this woman comes over, like a prostitute or something, and pisses on him. And then like every 5 minutes, someone just like vomits on the floor, or Margot Robbie like vomits all over a guy's face. It's like, what the fuck is this? How is this supposed to be art? How is this supposed to be like cinema? I did eventually get into it, and I got into the characters, and you know, Brad Pitt was fantastic, and Margot Robbie was fantastic. It takes a couple of weird left turns towards the end of like the second act, where Tobey Maguire takes these guys to this like underground fight club, and then they start killing people, and then they get chased out of there. I did like the final montage where Manny comes back to LA after having to go on the lam. He comes back in like the 50s, and he's watching Singing in the Rain, and that's all about the transition from the silent era to the talkies, which was like kind of what Babylon was about. Except Singing in the Rain did it a million times fucking better. Singing in the Rain is 1,000 times better fucking movie than Babylon. But I did love that he's sitting in the cinema and he's watching Singing in the Rain, and then what's on the screen kind of turns into like a montage of clips from like the whole of movie history, and you see like clips from like 2001, and it kind of like perfectly illustrates like what this art form can do, and how the talkie era and the color era, opened it up, and you could tell all these different kinds of stories. You could create these different kinds of visuals and aesthetics. I loved that. That was like a love letter to the movies, which the whole film was supposed to be. But then it got sidelined with all the shit, piss, and vomit. Only murders in the building. This is such a huge hit show, and I don't know why it took so long for me to get around to watching it, because I fucking adore Steve Martin and Martin Short. I think it was like season 3 was coming out, and the trailers were popping up everywhere, and you see like Meryl Streep and Paul Rudd, and it's like, holy shit, if they can get these guest stars, this must be a fucking good show. And I've been loving it. Obviously Steve Martin and Martin Short have fantastic chemistry, and Selena Gomez, I was really surprised by her ability. She gets a lot of laughs in the show, which I would think would be impossible when you're in the same frame as Steve Martin and Martin Short. How are you gonna be able to get any laughs? But she's really funny in it, and she has great chemistry with them as well. It's just a great show. I've really been enjoying it. Chicken Run. I rewatched Chicken Run after watching the trailer for the sequel, and I didn't think it looked that great, But the original is a stone cold classic. It's like a POW Prison Break style movie, like The Great Escape, but like set on a chicken farm. It's such a great concept, and they pulled it off so fucking well, and the animation's incredible. I really hope the second one can live up to it, but I really don't see that happening. Monsters University. I kept getting recommended this after I watched the first one. Disney Plus kept being like, well, you watched Monsters Inc., do you want to watch Monsters University? And I don't think I'd seen it since it came out, which was like 10 years ago. But when it did come out, I enjoyed it a lot. I went to watch it a few times at the cinema. It has the problem that a lot of prequels have, where it's like, where it's going to end up. Like, at first, Mike and Sully don't like each other, but they're eventually going to be best friends, so it kind of just follows this predictable arc, because we know they're best friends at some point in the future. And the story isn't as clearly focused as the first one. It's more of a series of sketches. But, they're good sketches, so it's not as great or as transcendent and beautiful as the first one. But it's still a cut above, like, your average animated movie. I rewatched Rick and Morty Season 6 in anticipation of Season 7, which I don't know how they're going to handle this recast. But Season 6 was great. Season 6, I think, is one of the best seasons they've ever done. Not every episode lands that well, like the dinosaur one, I think I could do without. But the one where Summer has to do a Die Hard in Blitz and Chips, or Blips and whatever, Blips and Chits, the arcade. That was so great, and I love the idea, like Peter Dinklage is so funny as like the Hans Gruber figure, and how he's saying like, she's never seen Die Hard, which makes her the ultimate McClane, and this whole idea that like every civilization has some version of the Die Hard story. And the one with the Knight family was so good. There's like such a great, like, it was such a great horror premise and some really great horror visuals, but still so funny, still such a funny episode. I really hope Season 7, whatever they do with who's gonna play fucking Rick and Morty from now on, whatever they do with that, I really just hope the writing of Season 7 can live up to Season 6. Season 6 was great, and I would love to see more. Like, it's just such great premises. They always come up with such original, unique premises, like storylines that only Rick and Morty could do. I've been watching Welcome to Wrexham Season 2, which blows that you have to wait week by week, because the Season 1, I'm not sure if that was released weekly or they released it in one go. I think they did release it in one go, but I only watched it a couple of months ago anyway. Because I'm not a huge football fan, but I'm a huge Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney fan. And it's a fun show, like, even if you don't give a fuck about football, which I really could not fucking care less about football, you kind of get into it. You want them, you're following these, underdogs. Okay, now they have Hollywood money behind them, so not quite so much the underdogs anymore. But it's still a struggle. You gotta fight to get from league to league, or whatever the fuck it's all about, get promoted, and then you get relegated, and you gotta get promoted again, or whatever the hell. It's just, it's a good time, it's kind of a feel-good show, it's the worst thing that could ever happen is like they lose a game, or the pitch needs to be returfed, and that's going to be expensive. Or it's not like a documentary about like murder. It's a nice documentary. It's a nice documentary about some nice things. The Shining. This is another one I'm doing a video about, but I'm not going to release it till closer to Halloween. But either way, I won't go on about it too much because I don't want to spoil anything I've covered in there. But this was another one that was screened at my local cinema, so I got to see it on a big screen, and that was incredible. But this one, it's not like a special anniversary, and it's not even close to Halloween, so I don't even know why they were showing it. But I suppose there's no bad time to show The Shining. A lot of people fucking love this movie. It was a completely packed house. I think every seat was taken. I had a great time with it. It was it's one of my favorite movies, but I'd never seen it on a big screen before, and It's just mesmerizing. It just and gets progressively more mesmerizing as it kind of like the Jack descends into madness and the ghosts and the demons of the Overlook start to reveal themselves. And you just kind of go along for the ride, and it's like, it's scary and it's really unnerving, but it's also like kind of fun and kind of funny. There's some really dark humor moments in there that I think, you know, me and my sister and my dad, I think, were the only ones who were laughing at it. But you know, when Jack is like on the stairs, Wendy's swinging the bat at him, he's like, oh, give me the bat, Wendy, come on. And he says like, Wendy, darling, light of my life.
Wendy, darling, light of my life.
Like, that's just so funny. Him being eternally frustrated with Wendy when Wendy's done nothing wrong. He just like, she opens her mouth and he just grates on him and he just hates her. That's kind of funny. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but that's kind of funny. Like, not funny that she's being treated like shit by her husband, but just funny that he's that much of a dick. Elemental. This came on Disney Plus, and I hadn't seen it. And I was one of the idiots who prematurely branded Elemental a box office bomb before it made its glorious comeback and actually turned a profit, or at least broke even. And I thought it was fucking good. I just kind of avoided it in cinemas because all the reviews were like, you know, it's just typical Pixar doing Pixar's thing, and you know. But I like that. I like Pixar's thing. And this was so wonderful. This was like really like came straight from the heart of the director Peter Sohn. It was based on his own experience. He was like the son of Korean immigrants, and this is basically an immigration story set in like the water city. It's like a world where all the elements, all the natural elements are people, and you know, there's this like white water neighborhood full of affluent water people, and the fire people come over on the boat and open up a little shop, and they're trying to like make their sort of corner and live the American dream, but it's like the water city dream. And Ember, the daughter of the immigrants, she's kind of like, you know, I know nothing of the immigrant experience. When I did my Everything Everywhere All at Once video, some people in the comments said, you know, you didn't mention anything about how it reflects the immigrant experience. It's like, because I don't know anything about, I can't speak to that. I can't speak about the immigrant experience. But I feel like I learned a lot just from watching Elemental's kind of allegory of the whole thing, about like the pressures that she's under from her dad. He wants her to take over the shop, and she wants to do other things, but she doesn't want to let her parents down. And then she meets Wade, this water guy who lives in a nice water apartment with his family. And he's like, oh, just follow your dreams, do what you want to do. And she's like, well, that's easy for you to say. That's not so easy for me to say from my experience. And I kind of dismissed it. When I saw the trailer, I thought like, you know, so Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers storyline. How many times have we seen that? Do we really need another one? But the love story really got to me. It really moved me. And then at the end, when Ember does the bow with her dad, it was just such a beautiful ending. And that got me all teary-eyed as well. Like, say what you will about Pixar, and the last few years, they've been a little bit more hit and miss than they were in the early days. But they still fucking know how to make you cry. They still know how to rip your heart out of your chest and make you cry your eyes out. So when Elemental came out, it was like fun to be like, haha, Pixar failed again. But that was kind of completely uncalled for. But it's just a really wonderful, lovely movie. I recommend anyone checking it out. Little Women. This is another case where, you know, an old-timey costume drama I ordinarily wouldn't be into because Greta Gerwig wrote and directed it. I love it. I watch it like once a year, maybe. Probably my least favorite of Greta Gerwig's films, but certainly because I fucking love the others so damn much. And because this one is like I say, a genre I'm not typically into. But I do think with Little Women's such a more interesting story than Pride and Prejudice, you know. And Jo March is such a more interesting character than Elizabeth from Pride and Prejudice. Because she's a writer. She's all about, I've got to finish my novel. She's not about, I've got to find a husband. But she gets a bit older, all of her sisters get married, and, or one of them dies, if I remember correctly. And so she's left alone, and she's like, well shit, maybe I should get a husband too. But that's not her goal as a character. That's not what her character needs. She needs to be a writer. She needs to tell her story and get it out there and get it in people's hands and get fucking paid. And it's just so beautiful to watch at the end, the emotional catharsis of her. She's kind of gazing through the window as her book is getting printed, and it's getting put in a hardback cover, and they're putting Little Women by Jo March on the front of it. It's just a beautiful movie. I think I normally hate the kind of fusty old dialogue in these movies, but the dialogue is fantastic in this because Gerwig is in the business of naturalistic dialogue and dialogue with a bit of a modern clip to it. So it's, of all the costume dramas there are out there, the kind of old-timey love stories that are out there, maybe my least favorite genre, certainly one of them. This is probably my favorite of that. My favorite film of a genre I don't really like. Star Wars Rebels. I was gonna watch this before Ahsoka because, Ahsoka was supposed to be like Rebels Season 5, and I thought if I'm gonna be reviewing this every week, I need to catch up on Rebels and be able to follow it and be able to know who the characters are. And then I never got around to it, and I started watching Ahsoka, and I felt like, well, I don't need to know Rebels. This is telling you everything you need to know about these characters and their relationships, so I don't really need to watch Rebels. And then as Ahsoka went on, and I was really enjoying it, and it was getting better and better, and these characters, I was really falling in love with these characters like Hera and Sabine, and I just thought they were great characters, and I thought, well, I want to see more of them now. So then I went back and started watching Rebels and got to know when Ahsoka came into the mix and what her relationship with all of them is like, and it does help. Like Ahsoka, you can watch Ahsoka if you haven't seen Rebels, it'll make sense, but it's a richer experience if you have seen Rebels and you know what this is all building on. But I'm just loving this. I thought it would be like a big sprawling show like the Clone Wars, where it goes all over the show, where different episodes focus on different characters. And there are a couple of bottle type episodes where they'll focus on one character in particular, but it mostly is just this ensemble show about this particular group of people in this ship. And I'm loving spending time with them. I'm on season 3 now, so I'm almost done, but I've been enjoying it so much. And all the stuff with legacy characters, like whenever Leia shows up, or Vader shows up, or Maul has been having a great arc in this. They just handle it so well. I feel like that's just another case of like, you can trust Filoni. He knows what he's fucking doing. The Favorite. All the press for Poor Things reminded me how great Yorgos Lanthimos' last movie was. So I rewatched The Favorite, and it kind of I remember it being funny. I remember it being kind of like a dark comedy. But it's so funny. It's like so laugh out loud funny, like a comedy should be. But it's this old costume drama. And actually that's another case where this actually might even beat Little Women, or they're at least on par as being like the two movies I like from this genre I don't like. And I normally could give less of a shit about the royals. You know, I never got into The Crown. But Olivia Colman as Queen Anne? I think it's Anne. One of the queens, whatever queen she plays. She's incredible, and she's an actor that you can really latch onto and really emotionally connect to, even when she's playing a queen. And she actually makes her this sympathetic character, which is hard to do with an English monarch, because they're among the most evil tyrants of history. If you look at the shit that they've done over the years, even to this day, Prince Andrew. So it's hard to relate to them, or it's hard to give a shit about their problems. But with The Favorite, it's not difficult. With The Favorite, you kind of are into the Olivia Colman character, and you want to see what happens with her. And Emma Stone is great, as always. She's always so fucking great, and I can't wait to see her in Poor Things, because she's going to be great in that too. Barbie. This was watching Barbie again paired with watching Little Women has inspired a Greta Gerwig video that I will be coming out with shortly. So keep an eye out. This was my first time watching Barbie at home, because my friend hadn't seen it and it was streaming, so we watched it. And it's not the same as watching it at home. Is not the same as watching it in a crowded theater. This was the first comedy in fucking years, like a big studio comedy, a big star-studded comedy that you went to on the opening weekend, and there was a big crowd. Or even like when Barbie was in cinemas, I went to watch it a few times just for the experience of watching it with a crowd, because that was a feeling I had not had in a long fucking time. On the opening weekend, going there, and it's a packed house, and everyone's laughing hysterically at all these jokes. It was like being at a good stand-up comedy show, where there's this just energy in the room, where everyone's united and being like, this is fucking funny. So it just wasn't the same experience watching it at home with me and one other guy. If you missed it in cinemas, you really missed out on something. You really missed out on like a cultural moment. But it's still a really good film. It's still a really fun, entertaining film. The soundtrack is absolutely fantastic, because obviously, like I'm Just Ken is a fucking fantastic musical number. Incredibly well staged and well shot and well performed. And the whole sequence where Ken is playing Push by Matchbox 20 for Barbie, and the camera pans around and all the other Kens are singing the exact same song to all the other Barbies. And the Billie Eilish song, What Was I Made For, I've been listening to a ton. Those lyrics are like poetry. Like she took the key concepts and plot points of the movie. There's the opening line, I think, is, I used to float and now I fall down. And that's like Barbie used to float down off the roof into her car, and then she fell down when things started to go fuck up. So that relates directly to something that happens in the Barbie movie. But if that was just in a song, that would still hit you really deep. It's like, so she took what is basically a slapstick gag in the movie and turned it into this beautiful line of poetry. And that's, if those lyrics were just written down, that would be a poem. And I might actually be wrong, because I don't even read a ton of poetry. I don't like poetry. But if poetry read like Billie Eilish lyrics, then I'd fucking read some poetry, because it would be good then. Dazed and Confused. This is another 30th anniversary screening. It must have come out the same year as Jurassic Park. And this is another great fucking movie. This is one of my absolute favorites. This is a top 5, maybe even top 3 movie for me. Because it just perfectly captures... It's the ultimate hangout movie, you know, and it perfectly captures the feeling of being 18, you're just on the brink of, you know, adulthood, and the sky's the limit, and it's probably not going to turn out that great, but at the time it feels like now I'm free of the shackles of school and my parents, and I'm a grown-up, and I can go and do whatever I want. And it just, that feeling is encapsulated in this beautiful movie where all that really happens is a bunch of teenagers go out and hang out and drink beer and smoke weed and talk shit with each other. But that's great. That's perfect. You don't always need a plot, you know? This is a movie you can just, it's a vibe. You just sit down and you just take it in. I watched some early 2.5 Men's. When I ran out of, when I got to the end of Arrested Development Season 3, that was my new fall asleep to show. And I think 2.5 Men is now, it's either remembered as a shit show because the last few seasons with Ashton Kutcher were, they started off okay and still nowhere near as good as when Charlie was there, but start off okay, and then they just descend into complete and utter diarrhea. It's so fucking bad. And the finale was like, basically like a middle finger to the fans, because it was Chuck Lorre basically using this finale episode to take like a dig at Charlie Sheen and kill Charlie off again. And then he put himself in it. You see him sitting in his little director's chair, like, winning. And it's like, dude, you've completely tanked the end of your beloved show to what? Hold a grudge against someone? So that's remembered as like an awful fucking show. And then even the later seasons with Charlie was just like, there was no sweetness left whatsoever. There was no sincerity left. It's just the show where there's lots of sex and debauchery. And as Jake was getting older, he wasn't cute anymore. And I think it's also, you know, you either look back on it as it was a piece of shit show, because it got shit, or you look back on it and think it was a completely problematic, sexist, misogynistic show because it's about this quote-unquote womanizer who objectifies women and doesn't really respect women. And that is true, those attitudes are baked in there, but I think what a lot of people forget is that they had Charlie and Alan's mom Evelyn was always around, and the housekeeper Bertha was there, and they're they're very strong, very independent, very self-assured women who won't stand for any of that shit. Like they are constantly emasculating Charlie and Alan and putting them in their place, and that's what makes it so funny. That's what makes it work so well, is that they have these attitudes and they get completely deflated when these very strong women come in and yell at them, you know. And in the early seasons, you know, I was watching, I think, season 2. The first sort of 2 or 3 seasons are really sweet. There's like a soft side of Charlie that they eventually just got rid of, you know, but it's like he will occasionally do the right thing because he loves Alan or because he loves Jake, and there's so much fun in that dynamic where they're constantly bickering, but there's real love there. So I think it's a great show, and I think it's those early seasons anyway hold up today, because they're just, I mean, it was at one point like the highest rated show on television. It was a huge hit, and now it's like been completely forgotten about because it went so drastically downhill, a la The Walking Dead. To the point where you were just begging the producers to put the fucking show out of its misery. But those early seasons were great, you know. King Richard. This was a movie, I missed it when it came out, and then I probably would have watched it straight after Will Smith had won Best Actor for it, if the Best Actor win had not been overshadowed by, like, the worst mistake of his entire life. Because now it's just known as the movie that Will Smith won Best Actor for right after he'd smacked Chris Rock like a maniac. But now it's, you know, it's been like a couple of years, the dust settled, and you know, it came up on Prime or whatever, and decided to watch it. Even though it's 2.5 fucking hours long, I didn't think it would be that long. But honestly, it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was an hour 45. It felt like a nice, briskly paced movie. And he's incredible. I can see why he won Best Actor. I can't see why the Academy let him stay at the ceremony to accept it, because he had been up and fucking hit Chris Rock like a lunatic. So you'd think, why don't they kick him out? Give him, so fucking send him his Oscar in the post. But just as a movie about a father's love and a father's encouragement, but he's also like very controlling and very much like, I wrote out the plan for your life before you were even born, and if anyone tries to deviate from that plan, even a professional professional tennis coach who knows exactly what he's doing, then I'm not going to listen to him. You're going to do exactly what I've planned for you to do. You know, it was just great. It was like he's very flawed. Like, he forces his daughters to watch the whole of Cinderella, and then he's like, what was the lesson from that? And then they're trying to give him an answer, and he's like, no, you misunderstood. We're watching it again. He wants to put the whole of Cinderella on again because they didn't get exactly the reading of it that he wanted them to have that would make them successful tennis players. So he's a little bit crazy, this guy. He's not go up on stage and slap Chris Rock crazy, but he's kind of crazy. But that made him interesting to watch. You know, it's not that interesting to watch a great parent, you know. But it is interesting to watch a loving parent who wants nothing but the best for their kids and has dedicated their entire life to propping up their kids and making sure their kids do well, but is also deeply flawed and has some of these problems that become recurring problems. Eventually they become big problems. At first you can kind of overlook it. But some of the lessons he wants to teach the girls are pretty questionable. Like, he wants to abandon them at a shop in the middle of nowhere and just drive home. And his wife is like, you're not fucking leaving my kids here. Pull over. That was great. I'm not sure who played his wife, but they had really, really great chemistry as this couple who are both on exactly the same page about, like, we're going to make these girls really successful and we're going to make sure they have every opportunity that we didn't have. But also on the smaller things, completely disagreeing with each other on some of the more specific details of it. It was just great. And like, again, like, I'm not a big fan of tennis. I'm not a big sports guy, but I like sports movies, and I like when they're in a case like this. Like, the actors who were playing Venus and Serena were fantastic. Especially, I think Venus was the one at first. Like, when they get a pro coach, he won't coach both of them. He will only coach one. He picks Venus, I think. So she's the one going to all these matches, and like some of them she wins effortlessly, and some of them she really struggles. And the actor was just doing so again. Really don't. I'm sorry, but I don't know any of their names. I know Will Smith, and I know John Bernthal. I don't really know anyone else, but it was just great when she's losing a match, and you can see that it's like really getting to her, but she wants to just stay cool and get in the game, but it's like it becomes harder and harder the more points you're losing, and the pressure starts to mount. And I just think that you know, for an actor who all she has to do with the scene is stand on a tennis court and hit balls. But she did such a great job of showing just on her face just all the emotions that are going through her head. It was just beautiful to see the ending where she's not so sure of herself, and she thinks of herself as maybe a bit of a failure, and then she comes out of the tennis court and there's just a huge crowd of girls who are looking up to her, who she's inspired. That was really beautiful. And then at the end it has that thing biopics have where there's like footage of the real person. And not only do you see, like, you know, you're like, oh, there's the shorts Will Smith is wearing, and that's the van he's been driving around in, but it's also like you see that the real Richard Williams cared so much about his daughters and cared so much about them doing well. I thought it was great. It's such a shame that movie was overshadowed by the Oscars slap, because on its own it's a terrific piece of work. The Rental. This is a creepy fucking movie. Directed by Dave Franco, I think, in his directorial debut. It's just another case where an actor has been working with great directors their whole life, and then when they step up to direct, they know how to do it, and they know how to do it well. He did such a great job of building the suspense in this, building the tension in this, and it's about these two couples who go away they've like rented an Airbnb type property in the middle of nowhere, and so there's Dan Stevens and Alison Brie are married, and then Jeremy Carmy from The Bear plays Dan Stevens' brother, and his girlfriend is another one, I can't remember her name. She was the girl in A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. So right off the bat there, you got four fucking phenomenal actors acting off each other. And so the girl from A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, she's Carmy's girlfriend, and she's also Dan Stevens' business partner. But there's tension between them, there's sexual tension between them. And so they go up to this cabin, and Alison Brie, once an early night, she goes to bed. The other three take ecstasy, and they're having a great time. They get in the hot tub. And then Carmy, he passes out, he goes to bed. So it's just Dan Stevens and the girl walks home alone at night together, and the sexual tension, of course, it's a hot tub, they're on Molly. They end up fucking in the shower. And then the next day, she spots a little camera on the shower head and realizes they've been being filmed in the shower. And then you think that's going to be the conflict of the movie. And it works perfectly well just as this domestic drama about these two couples, and two of them having an affair together, and the other two are kind of putting the pieces together. And I would have been perfectly happy if that was the whole movie. But then it turns into a horror movie, because you see this mysterious guy in black gloves sneaking around the place. And you never see his face, but you know he's there. And so from that, as soon as you see him, you're just waiting for him to pop out and kill them all. And Dave Franco did such a terrific job of building the tension around that and having you on the edge of your seat, like, what the fuck's gonna happen? Who is this guy? And then the ending, you know, without giving it away, is very straightforward. It's very, you know, there's no real mind-blowing twist that turns everything around. It more or less just goes the direction you're expecting it to go. But as just a standard horror movie, it was really, really well made and really, really tense and exhilarating and just everything you could want from a horror movie like that. So I thought it was great. I liked it. I didn't like so much that I then had to be alone in my house all night. But that just means it was a really effective horror film. If it keeps you scared after it's over and it's dark out, then it did its job. So there you have it, everything I watched in September. It was this was a bigger list than last time, because last time I'd only come up with the idea to do it like a couple of weeks into August. So I claimed it was everything I watched in August, but it was actually like half the shit I watched in August. But this big fucking list that I've just rattled off now, that's the full whole hog of September. And I think also just this month I had a lot less going on than I had going on last month. Last month I was out seeing people quite regularly. This month has been a little less regular, so I've had more time to watch television and movies. So anyway, even if this one does even worse than the August one, I'm doing October, so I'll see you in October. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.